Hello, friends, and welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm your host, Megan Colleen Johnson, and I'm here to guide us in raw conversations about thriving in life and work, so that together we can step into personal agency and stop letting life happen to us. We'll cover topics like health, boundaries, communication, finances, and worthiness. That badass business you've been dreaming of, it's not so far off. The desire to wake up feeling fully alive, it's right around the corner. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reclamation Podcast. Today's conversation is going to be so good. It's going to be like, I've just been excited to have this conversation for a while. I feel like today I have Kat with me, and I'm going to share a little bit more about her in a second, but she and I got to chat a little bit previously when I was interviewed for her podcast, and I've been excited ever since to have her on mine as well. So before I share her bio, I am recording from my office today. I have a berry tea in front of me. It's pretty delicious. I've already had a couple coffees today, so I decided to switch over to some decaf tea. And it's a beautiful sunny day outside. I'm really excited. Then after this, I'm just going to go sit outside and finish my day working outside. So that's kind of where I'm at and where I'm recording from. So today I have with me Catharinas Joubert, and she is a South African nomad who thrives on creativity that bursts with soul. She's had to build a life from scratch in several countries, including Japan, France, and England. Previously a foreign language expert, her mission was to help students open doors to new and exciting career opportunities and improve cross-cultural understanding. Now she is the founder of Creators Abroad, which helps to build bridges between people, professions, cultures, and countries. She interviews creatives about the jobs they quit, the transformation they desire, and how they're making it happen. And I know there's so much more to that. I had to shorten the bio a little bit, which I think is just going to lend us to even more juicy conversation. But Kat, it's so exciting to have you, and I'm so honored to have you today.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. I mean, this is like my first podcast. I don't know if I should even acknowledge that, but there you go.
Well, you talk regularly on yours, and I know we've chatted briefly on Clubhouse as well, so you're familiar with having the mic around.
That's true, but I never realized how nerve-wracking it can actually be to be the guest. So, but I'm here and I'm ready.
No, well, it'll be fun. We'll just chat. Yeah. It's just a conversation.
Right.
So I'd love if you could just share with us and share with the audience and me just where you're recording from, what you have in front of you, kind of painting a picture of where you're at right now.
Okay. So I'm at my desk. Big surprise there, but maybe what listeners wouldn't expect. I live in a quaint market town in North Yorkshire, which is kind of like in the northern part of England. Fairly unknown, beautiful, mysterious, and just so much warmth here. Now, today is an unusual sunny day, but it is evening as well, so the day's over. And I'm sitting at a standard pinewood desk from IKEA, which I bought after arriving in the UK. It's a bit too big, and there is at the moment quite a bit of clutter. Well, I've got all my recording equipment out, the Focusrite, the Scarlett, mixer, mic, and so forth. And to be honest, not much else is on the desk. My vlogging cam, and there's a cat on my lap. She regularly interrupts my interviews and podcasts and so forth, but I'm used to it by now. She always just wants to be part of it.
I love that. So fun. And yeah, I did forget that it's evening already, your time. So thank you as well for giving us your evening today.
No worries.
I actually think that I actually have an IKEA desk in front of me as well. I'm not really sure. It's painted because it was a dark brown, and I redid my office recently, and my husband helped me kind of convert it so it fits in the space right now until I get a new one. So I think it's just an IKEA desk that we've made work.
Yes, I mean, we've just basically got IKEA furniture. We've always said oh yeah, we're going to get some new furniture and stuff, but never got around to it. And now I'm pretty happy with all the bare bones stuff. I mean, it's fine. We get by.
Yeah.
There's also a futon on the floor, by the way. That's a long story. Not going to go into that.
Oh man, I love it. I would love to know the stories, but
one day when we've had a couple of drinks, I'll tell it.
Sounds good. Perfect. So I would love if you could share, because like I said, your bio has so much stuff in it, and you've really done a lot, and you continue to do so many things with your present endeavor, the Creators Abroad. So I'd love if you could share just kind of like, what is your story? How did you start? We have two topics that we're really going to be diving into today, and I'm sure that as you share your story, they'll kind of weave into that. But yeah, what is your story? Tell us about you.
It's quite a complicated story. Like when I was thinking about this, and whenever I have to explain it, I always just like go back to the beginning, sort of, because that is really where it all started. That is basically where Creators Abroad, previously known as Regeneration Studio, and previously my blog Teesside Cat, pretty much comes from. So as you mentioned, I was born in South Africa, and that does mean I have quite a mixed cultural heritage, hence my name, Catharinas Joubert. So I've got a bit of Afrikaans, Dutch, French, and I went to a British school. No English blood, but I went to a British school. So I've always had this kind of like exposure to loads of different cultures. And then I was lucky enough that my parents traveled a lot. So I basically spent my holidays wandering around museums and castles and monuments and just big cities in places like Italy, France, the States as well, New York. So I was really lucky in that. But of course, it did bring a little bit of cultural confusion within me, because I was really attracted to all these different places and these people and these languages. And in the process, I kind of like never really knew where I belonged. Now, cutting a bit more to like kind of where my creative interests come from. So obviously I was really inspired by all of these things. And then a lot of it had to do with like art and music. And that's pretty much what I spent my days doing. Now, interesting fact, I dropped out of school at about 13. And basically my mom enrolled me into like just a college. So I got all the textbooks, did all my schoolwork, and then would just spend my days like doing music, writing, and so forth. So I've always had this real desire to express the world I see around me in creativity. And that is really what Creators Abroad is about, is capturing the stories of other people doing that, and then giving me a chance to do that too. And I've now, what I'm really excited about, started my own like podcast production agency, where I can actually be able to do that for other people who want to share their stories too. But without the usual, because I mean, there are loads of production agencies. I mean, in your case, you would know there are plenty of life coaches out there, but it's really about looking at what they offer, and sometimes just cutting through all of the sort of the fluff and the flash, and just thinking, how can you actually help people, like a concrete way? And of course, mine is in just creating content. So before I could even do all of this, I did, however, obviously go to university. I lived in a couple of different countries, but during all of this time, I was pretty much a teacher. That's what I did. So I never really expressed or lived out my creativity, if you like. And the reason I became a teacher is simply, you study, well, that's what I studied at university. You study music and languages. And pretty much everybody tells you, because at some point you have to earn a living, you have to, pay the bills, you have to do those kind of things. And then everyone's just like, well, just become a teacher, secure job, you get holiday. And this is the thing that sold it for me. You get these long holidays, and during those holidays, you can do whatever you want. But in the meantime, you obviously have to do your job. So that's how I got into it. And I think you might be able to expand on this. Once you get into an industry, once you start in it, once you start going up those career progression steps, it's so hard to pivot out of that. You pretty much stay in it because it's the paycheck, it's just security, it's how it works. So yes, so I was pretty much trapped in education for 10 years while living a dual creative life. I then moved to the UK, and all this time, I've just always felt like, well, okay, I'm teaching people new skills and knowledge, that was great because I'm making a difference in their lives. It was kind of like a concrete thing. Not everybody's lives. There were loads of people who obviously didn't actually want to learn what I was teaching. That's in school context, of course. And then just at the back of my head, always this pressing desire to actually be able to create. So teaching and creating, it's not the same thing entirely. When I got to the UK, I obviously had to think once again about what career I'm going to follow, where am I going to spend all my time, where I'm going to put my energy into. And I discovered something called Teach First. Now you have this in America as well, and I think it's called Teach America.
Okay. I don't know that much about the teaching world.
All right. Well, it basically, this is what it is. They take, they say top graduates, and they basically just throw you in the deep end in the roughest schools in the country. So in the poorest areas. And the idea is that because you have no previous experience in that kind of teaching, and because you are kind of like an expert in your field. So in my case, it was foreign languages. I didn't clarify that. That's what I basically specialized in, is French, Spanish, and so forth. Because of those two things, you will be able to raise the aspirations of the children you teach. And this sounded great to me because now finally it seemed like I was going to do more than just teach. I was going to make I'm going to have that impact. And I did that. So for the last 3 years, up until 2019, I was a Teach First ambassador, if you like. And as rewarding as that was, I mean, building those relationships with kids who really, they come from, I don't even know how to describe the backgrounds. Obviously, you had the ones who were fine, who had normal family lives, but you also had those who, their parents were drug addicts, they were heavily neglected, or they didn't have parents, so they were moved from care home to care home. So I was dealing with that at the same time as trying to teach them a foreign language. I was trying to convince them that, French is important, learn French.
Yeah.
For them, I mean, for some of these kids, like just getting food, that was the
more of the priority. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I quit. In 2019, I quit because as much as I was perhaps changing some lives, not all of them, I'll be frank about that. No teacher changes every single student's life because it's all about the relationship you build, and you can't build that close relationship with every single student that comes through your door, every single client that you see. And then, of course, I was actually losing myself in that process. So teachers are not free. You cannot post online. I was secretly, during this time I started pole dancing. So, and I started doing it as a way to kind of relax, to deal with anxiety because of the stress of the workload. But I couldn't acknowledge it. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't post anything about it. It was like the secret. So, and I just started getting really, really tired of losing part of myself, also losing the creativity because, and you can tell me if this is something you've experienced. As a creative, you want to express your ideas, you want to say what you think, but in very heavily regulated contexts like schools, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And in the process, I just felt like I was actually losing a lot of students. So I thought, well, what can I do? I can actually do a podcast. I can do a YouTube channel where there is a barrier anymore, where if the students who really had a good relationship with me, they can then really interact on a very, very human level. And what's more, I can reach more people, not only the ones I'm teaching, but in fact, and I made the mistake of just thinking, oh, it's just going to be my town. It's just going to be my area. And then I realized, well, podcasting is a very international thing. So yes, I could reach more people that way. But yeah, that's the rough outline. And that's where I'm at the moment. So much else has happened in between. I don't know if you've got any questions or clarification on any of those points.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like there's so we kind of had established two different themes to talk about. And that's kind of actually what I'm hearing a couple of things. But first of all, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing, because I can definitely hear that and resonate with that. And I feel like that's where so many of my audience members and my clients, we've all experienced this some level, the world eventually kind of shrivels us up in some way. We're trying to make a difference. We're trying to use our skills. And then we just find ourselves in this place where we have to get out and find a different way to move forward. It is that like reclamation of self. You had to come back to yourself and come back to what you love to do and what you're like gifted at doing so that you can actually thrive in this life. And so one thing I wanted to circle back on was kind of that cultural piece of things, because you kind of have a few different things. So you had to reclaim culture for yourself in a lot of ways. Can you speak a little bit to that? I also wanted to ask, what made you move to the UK?
Oh, yes. Okay. So basically, if I can just say for each country that I went to, it was just opportunity. So the moment I saw an opportunity, I took it. And in the case of the UK, my partner, who I met in South Africa, his family's in the UK. So
gotcha.
When the opportunity came for him to move, I said, yeah, okay, I'll leave everything behind. I'll quit my job. And then it's basically starting from scratch again. So, but I've done that before, so I wasn't too intimidated by it. But in the same process, I think a big part of moving around, and this is to the point of your question about culture, was also kind of trying to find a culture that I was like, oh, I fit in. And then every single time I arrive in a place, I'm like, ooh, I'm a foreigner. I'm an immigrant. I don't fit in. And so it's been actually only recently. And this is something I'm going to, one of my tips at the end, is only since I've openly started talking about cultural confusion and started expressing all the different facets of the cultures I've thought I belonged to, that I started feeling now I can acknowledge where I actually belong, which is, well, I was born in South Africa. I'm South African. And I never wanted to acknowledge that before, because I always was like going around and like, oh, I'm going to fit in here. No. And then, that kind of thing. And I think it's so important, because there's so many people living in foreign countries struggling with these questions and actually not feeling like they can express it, because there is quite especially with all the recent things, maybe not so much now, but a bit of a stigma surrounding immigrants or foreign people in other countries.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what has your experience been in navigating some of those narratives? Because that is difficult. There are a lot of stigmas. It's unfortunate because it's just labels that people use.
Yeah, I know.
But what has that been like for you? Like, how has that experience been, and how have you reclaimed that for yourself?
Yeah, so as I say, this is quite a sensitive topic, because it's only very recently that I've actually, I'm pretty happy to talk about it. In fact, I really want to, but it's only like recently that I've put up a video on Instagram of me talking in my native language, which is something I've denied up to this point now. And it's partly because you're trying really hard to fit in. And why? Because the moment you open your mouth and people suspect that you're not one of them, that you didn't grow up in the same area, they treat you differently. And there's no basis for it. You're just as human as they are. And it's not necessarily that they treat you badly, but they treat you differently. And differently in the sense that they're perhaps not as inviting, that they perhaps won't tell you certain things, that they just perhaps won't include you in the same way they would include somebody who they're immediately like, oh yes, you grew up in my hometown. And it's really hard. It's not something, not even something you want to acknowledge. That's how hard it is.
Yeah, absolutely. That is like such a heavy thing. And it kind of actually leads me into, I know you and I briefly had talked about when we had done my interview, is you had also mentioned how you had kind of deconstructed some from your faith that you had grown up with. And I feel like in some ways, of course, it's not the same, but in some ways it seems similar to my own experience with with the church, where it was interesting when I started publicly stating I no longer identify as a Christian. It's different, and your experience is different. I want to validate that. Yeah. But I feel like there's similar threads where then I started to experience kind of that similar, like, people treat me differently. They, maybe don't invite me to things, or they exclude me. And there's just an interesting dynamic, I think, when as humans, we really attach to labels, and it's unfortunate how we see people as other, and how we do, like, there's just that polarization that happens when really we're all just people, like, and that's really beautiful that you got the courage to really embrace that for yourself. And I imagine that's been really difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree that it is labels, that we love labels. We do. It helps us understand the world, and the world is, it's a mysterious place. You want answers. That's just something that's been happening throughout the history of mankind, is we're constantly looking for answers. And the way for us to help find those answers is to put labels on things, because now we can put them in boxes, and we can label them, and we can organize our world. Like a drawer. Yeah. Like your cupboard. Shirts go in there, that kind of thing, pajamas, underwear, etc. And then you've got your hierarchy of what's important for you, what's less important, and that's how you interact. And the moment somebody moves from one drawer to another drawer, you're going to treat them differently.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily to say that this is correct. And this is what I realized this halfway through doing Regeneration Studio, or setting this podcast up, because I did a lot of soul searching, and it was only by leaving the education sector and really diving into my creativity and relying on my creativity to now, okay, I've got to make something work. I've got to make a living off of this. Through relying on it, that's when I started discovering these things, and really discovered that I don't want to put out this idea, or this labeling idea, this living inside of a box. And that's why I started as my podcast intro, saying that it's meant to help people live outside of the box, to start getting rid of the labels.
Yes.
Taking an axe and, chopping up the wardrobe and with all the drawers and stuff, and just reconstructing your world.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I feel like in coaching, or in the way that I like to work with people, it's really this idea of, so we live with all these labels, beliefs, values, and oftentimes we're unconsciously kind of living with them. So we have this wardrobe that it's been constructed based on our entire life. And then we have this opportunity to, destroy the wardrobe and say, these aren't working anymore. Oh, wait, I didn't even realize they were there. You can destroy it. And then we can kind of take a look at, there's so many other options. What's a belief system, and what are the values, and what are the labels that will support the type of life I do actually want to live? Because when we have those, like you were saying, it is important for that organization of our life, but we have an opportunity to reevaluate and say, how do I want to live from a place of integrity? To how I actually it's just switching from that unconscious beliefs to the conscious, making them shifting that. Does that land kind of with what you're?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, and this is scary, like what you're describing and what I've touched on.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing I've realized. People don't want to do this. You can explain it to them and tell them that you don't have to live by the labels. You don't have to let other people tell you what to do with your body. And this is touching a little bit on doing pole dancing and being very open about it and what it is and what it's not. You don't actually have to be bound by those labels. And then some people are scared shitless by that thought, because suddenly you're telling them the world that they know can be different. And they just have to.
It can be terrifying. Yeah.
It's terrifying, because that's the thing. It's just, we love familiarity. And that's why a lot of people never move. Never go to a new country, never go to a new town for that matter, because we love familiarity. We love street names, knowing that street and that's where the shop is. And if I go running, I can do that route and that route. And it's the same with labels and people. But the freedom and the fulfillment that you find once you make that step, once you say, well, I am actually going to live my life in the way that suits my beliefs, my values, and more importantly, what impact I want to have on my community and the greater world. Because I mean, it's one thing to say, well, we can't change the world, we just can't as a single human being, but the fact is, just do one small thing. Even if it's sitting in your office and doing that thing really, really good. And that small thing is a chain reaction to loads of things that change the world and change your community. So that's it.
Yeah, I love that. I like to think of it where, like, when we reclaim ourselves, kind of this process we've been talking about, or like the language I like to use for it, when we reclaim ourselves, it also is like this mirror and allows others to be able to witness that. It's like, that ripple effect could result in giving someone else permission to do the same thing. And even though it's, you know, it might feel like you're just doing little tiny steps to kind of reclaim yourself, to like work on yourself, that could result in a ripple effect. And in essence, then that's participating in like collective healing and collective reclamation, which is incredibly beautiful. And like, it's those small pieces, I think, that make the biggest difference over time.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, just imagine a world where there weren't people like you, and well, I suppose me and other people doing these kind of things. Imagine what that world is going to look like if it's just a world filled with labels and people just sticking to those labels, and where discrimination actually just it gets allowed because it's okay, because it's just within the label, and that's not the world we want.
No.
To have that world.
No. So. Yeah. Well, that was incredibly beautiful. I loved that conversation and that kind of piece of things. Hey, it's Megan here. We'll get right back into today's conversation. But before we do, I'm here to let you know just a little bit about my life coaching and creative consulting. As a coach, I work with creatives, misfits, and holy outsiders who often feel trapped in overwhelm, overgiving, and fear, but who also have a passion for doing something meaningful in the world. These folks are ready to hand back their past programming and rise as the leader of their own life. If this sounds like you, and you are so ready to start your own reclamation journey, let's chat. I invite you to book a free consultation with me at my website, megscolleen.com. That's megscolleen.com. Now let's dive back into today's conversation. I know you touched on the pole dancing piece as part of your reclamation journey. So when I didn't realize that you actually started that when you were a teacher, as part of like a way to, it makes sense. Like it's something that you could just kind of go and do and like be able to release and just be in your own essence. But can you tell us more about that? Like, why did you choose pole dancing? How has that impacted you?
Yeah, it's so to be honest, it was like literally before I started teaching. It was like the July month before I started teacher training, which was in June or something. So it was kind of tandem to it. And the story behind that is quite interesting, because I used to do martial arts, actually used to be on the like national team, so kendo in particular. And when I moved to the UK, obviously there was a discrepancy in like being part of the South African national team, but living in England. And then it didn't feel right anymore. And I kind of knew that's a whole different reclamation story just there, because I had to
you have so many threads of reclamation stories. Like, wow.
I was just thinking, well, that's a whole story in its own. But yeah, so basically I just had to escape that kind of the pressure of being on a national team and all of that. And I had to find something else that was kind of the same but different. And I saw, and it's kind of weird because I just released an episode with a pole photographer who had kind of the same story of getting into pole. I saw a video on YouTube of this person just doing these amazing things on a pole. And it was just the combination of beauty, strength, and flexibility, which I don't have, by the way. I'm pretty rubbish at it. But yeah, I was just like, this is amazing. I'm going to start it. And of course, a lot of people were just like, oh, you won't be able to do it. You've never danced, like, you're not flexible. You get all these comments. And it's also like, oh, it's pole dance. Like, why would you want to do that? What's the point?
Yeah.
at least with martial arts, you're like, oh yeah, strength, and yeah, go woman.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, I went to the first class, and this happened to be like right around the corner from where I ended up teaching. And the instructor, I'm sure she won't mind if I say her name, Sarah Guthrie. She was just so welcoming and accepting, and everybody who arrived at that studio, didn't matter size, shape, age. We had a woman of 60. There, at some point she did children's classes because it is a really great form of fitness. It didn't matter. So it was just a space where you could be, and it was the first time in my life where I could just be. I could just pitch up and, had a crappy day and just be like, I can't even do half the things you want me to do, but I'm just going to like try anyway.
Yeah.
And it really helped me get over a lot of body image issues because, I mean, we spoke about it briefly in our interview on my podcast, that I grew up in a very conservative household, a Christian household as well. And we weren't allowed to wear bikinis. We weren't allowed to show much skin at all. And it was kind of like growing up with this sort of shame about our bodies. And then also being controlled by situations. So basically letting other people control how we think about like our physical
that
existence.
box
yes.
we were talking about. Yeah,
exactly. And it was very damaging. And pole dance slowly helped me become very comfortable with the fact that it was okay. Like it didn't harm anybody. You could sculpt your body, be athletic, and celebrate its beauty and its strength, and without worrying about what other people think, because to be honest, it didn't matter. It was your body's not their body.
Yeah.
And the moment you let somebody else own your body, that's the only thing you'll ever really, really, really possess your entire life long. Other things you can lose, your body you'll always have. So the moment you just give ownership of that over to somebody else and let them tell you what to do with it, you lose so much.
Yeah.
And rediscovering that is very powerful.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. So that's what pole dance helped me rediscover to the fullest. It was like an ongoing journey, but it really gave me that last push. And then, of course, when I quit teaching, I could finally be more open about it. And I'm still, if I'm posting a picture of me doing anything like that, I'm like, I can't post this. What are people going to think? But then immediately I'm like, it doesn't matter, because you understand the context, and you can't let those opinions and people's misconceptions and preconceptions and all those, the labels, dictate what you do in life, because then you're not going to live.
Totally. And like people are always going to have their perspective. They're always going to have their opinions.
Of course.
And what I always think is interesting when we talk about kind of embracing the labels, it's also this interesting thing where it's like a dual control thing that's happening, right? Like we're trying to somehow fit into the labels so that we can control their perception of us, so we do fit into the labels, but then they're actually controlling it. So it's like this dual piece of things, where there's like...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so when we kind of like free ourselves from that, it just releases all of those control narratives. It releases all of that, really the hierarchical dynamics and just that kind of toxicness that our many of our cultures are based on, and that they actually rely on in a lot of ways, and just allows a lot more freedom, which is really, really beautiful.
Yes, exactly. And then, like, just in my own example, I mean, as great as teaching was, it did, like I say, because it was such a label thing, like teaching, I mean, everything's labeled there. You get your year groups, you get your subject, everything, you get your teachers and the levels of teachers, and then you get all the do's and don'ts, the rules. It's filled with rules. So, I mean, leaving that environment and then being able to really live out the things that I love and trying to reach other people through that's just changed my life completely. And I still struggle. That's the other thing I wanted to be. I still struggle with of what people think about me, of what people think about what I do. And it's okay. It's okay to be scared.
Yeah.
It's okay to want to be liked. It's okay. But don't let it control everything you do.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. It's okay. And like we can hold space for both of those things. Like
Yes.
feeling that and then also kind of like taking that back. Yeah. I love that. And with that, so I would love if you could share a little bit more about what you do now. So we kind of like shared all of these different stories, but like tell us more about Creators Abroad and like what it is, what you do. I'd love to just hear more about that.
It's really exciting at the moment because I've literally just rebranded. So it used to be a regeneration studio, and I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do with that. Basically, it was just renewal. Obviously, renewal in life, reconnecting, finding deeper meaning. And as much as those things were very clear to me, I just found that it didn't always communicate well. So I thought, well, what expresses who I am and what expresses the people that I think I could reach best? Was Creator Abroad. And it just like it clicked. And I changed to that. And now also just organically, it grew a little bit beyond being a podcast. So originally I wanted to, and this is not very original, by the way, I just wanted to interview entrepreneurs because I thought I was really interested in business. I discovered no, I wasn't, because I'm like a creative. I am like that was phrased badly.
No, I do. I understand. They're very different conversations. Like I know I've been on a couple podcasts and like business podcasts, and it's so interesting. Like when I go from that to like a creative or an artist podcast, the conversations are very different. Like the business ones are a lot more like structured or like bullet points and like how to like optimize and things like that. And I feel like the creatives are a little more story oriented and flowy in conversation. There's just different energy completely. So I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes. So I was attracting a lot of business guests, like very dedicated. Sorry, that was a cat. She's very interruptive today. So I was attracting a lot of very business orientated guests, which was fine. It was fascinating topics. But I also realized that there were a lot of other similar kind of podcasts where, business stories were told and so on. I did want to focus on my area because, to be honest, I'm like one of a handful of independent podcasters in my area. But at the same time, I just found that it was not specific enough and I wasn't really having that impact I wanted.
Yeah.
So yes, I narrowed down to the people I really want to reach, I thought I could reach with my knowledge and expertise. And then I just started getting requests for producing podcasts, actually for someone in my area. And then I thought, well, I really enjoy creating content and I really enjoy what I think I can do well is listen to somebody, listen to what they do, listen to their story, and then capture who they are, their business, their creative business, like the soul of what makes them. Yeah. And reproduce that in content. So whether it's a podcast or a blog article. And I set up an agency, which is now launching as we speak in a sense.
I love it.
Yeah. So, and it's based on like real audio terms. So like echo, resonate with your audience and immerse. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing. And in the future, fingers crossed, I've got a revolutionary language learning method that I'm going to introduce to. So that just
that's fun. I love it.
Always have loads of plans, but yeah.
Well, that's the creatives world, right? There's always a lot of plans and ideas, and I feel like even just that recognition too of like when you had the regeneration studio and noticing how it flowed into Creators Abroad, like that's also just the beautiful piece of being a creative person is so there's room for exploration, which is like I feel like that's what life is about anyways. It's exploration and play. Exactly. And so good.
I'm going to be like completely honest. For one whole year, I was a blind podcaster, or should I say, no, wait, I'm not even going to try and phrase that cleverly. I'm just going to say I was blind. I didn't look. I literally didn't look at anything I was doing. I was just so focused on next episode. Oh, I'm getting all these guests and it's great. But I never actually thought, well, going back to what I said originally, I want to reach people. Am I reaching them? Who's my audience? And so forth. And it's been a learning journey, but I've acknowledged that. And it's changed a lot since the start of the year. Just acknowledging, first of all, that you need to be very honest with yourself when you start a creative business. And don't get caught up in just creating, because that feels great. But also start thinking, how are you making this work? What value are you actually delivering? And how can you improve? We can all, every single one of us can always just improve, but we have to start with the acknowledgement first.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. So then I would love to transition into the empowering tips for our people today. Yeah. So after your many threads of reclamation and reclaiming in so many different areas, what are like 3 tips that you can just offer the audience today?
Yes, and I love that you've got these tips at the end, because this is what I'm talking about, having something really concrete and valuable for your audience. So thank you for asking me to come up with these. And I just think I've touched on them already. But basically, the first step is don't allow, and I'm stressing this again, don't allow anyone to tell you what to do with your body. So stand up for who you are, what you believe in, and what you want to do. If it's not damaging somebody around you, and it's making you happy, and there's no reason, well, there isn't any reason to be ashamed, probably, if it's making you happy, do it and stand up for yourself. So if there's one thing in life, like I said, that you own until the end, you can lose everything else, all other possessions, but you'll never lose your body. That's the one thing you've got. And how you treat that body, what you do with it, is going to determine a lot of the other facets of your life and how happy you are in those facets.
Yeah.
So the second tip is kind of linking into that. And now people are probably going to go like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she just said that. But yes, I'm going to say it. Exercise. Now, I know it's not perhaps everybody's cup of tea, exercise, but find something that you enjoy. And if you can't find something that you enjoy, just find something that you can do on a regular basis, once a week. Because believe it or not only will this help you really own your body, because you're in control of it, you're not letting situations dictate, it will help you, that kind of adrenaline rush, and it overall, adrenaline rush is perhaps not the right word, but the making, the motivation that you get from that activity. And it can be something as beautiful as going for an hour-long walk in nature. That's exercise. Yeah. Brisk walk, put your podcast on, that kind of thing. That's fine. You'll be surprised how much that can actually change how you feel about yourself, and the things that you will then start believing you can achieve. Because that's one thing that made a massive difference twice in my life. One, the first time when I started martial arts, being a chubby tomboy, by the way, that's me, like teenager, chubby tomboy. Then started martial arts, changed my life. And the second time when I was a pretty miserable teacher, believing I'm changing the world, you started pole dancing. So that changed my life.
I love that.
And now this is more broadly, this is more on culture, but it also just speaks to any other really strong beliefs that you have. But on culture specifically, acknowledge your culture. Don't be afraid of it. Other people are going to make you feel afraid of it, make you feel afraid perhaps of the way you look or the way you speak because of how they react. Don't take it. Talk about it. Post about it online. Obviously not every day. Don't be one of those people, but just celebrate it. The moment I started doing that, and believe me, there's a lot of anxiety that I had before it, but the moment I started doing it and just seeing that, suddenly I got questions like, what is that language you speak? I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually my mother tongue. And the moment you actually get that interest from some people, you're going to find that it's okay. My culture is okay. I can be that. And the moment you're that, you can it just makes everything else feel so much better.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I love that. I know from my perspective, that last one is interesting too, because I feel like as an American, I have like a lot of like cultures, but it was actually interesting. I just had a conversation with my brother the other day about this because I did the Ancestry DNA, which allowed me to kind of just see my culture and where my different family members have come from and things like that. And it was really interesting and kind of liberating in a way, just to recognize, oh, this is the hardship that my ancestors had to go through, and just honoring that was really I felt like it just like lifted something off of me, which is really, really interesting. And I know when I was talking with my brother about it, and I think he'd be fine with me sharing this, but he was just kind of like, I don't know if I'd want to do that, because like I know we have a lot of like German in us, and I would hate to find out if like we had history that I don't want, that I'm not proud of. And I was like, well, it was actually really encouraging to me when I looked back at it, because I had the same fear before I looked back through our ancestry, but I actually found out like we came to America way, way, way before that. So like my family came to America way back, like like in the 1700s and the 1600s, like very early on in the American, I don't know, that time period.
Yes.
But it was just really interesting, because recognizing that and understanding some of that history, it almost like caused me to like be able to not judge my ancestors. Sorry, my throat's doing weird things. Because like my brother was judging our ancestors for potentially being, you know, Germans or whatever, but we didn't know their story. And it was actually really, really interesting. And they had gone through a lot of hard stuff. So that last tip specifically, I think is just interesting, because I feel like when you do recognize your culture, whether it's for you coming from like South Africa and you're the person that's moving countries, or for me, it's like 700 years worth of, you know, living in one place. Both, I think, scenarios, I feel like it's really liberating in a way to just be like, this is who I am and this is where I came from. This is what my ancestors also did. I don't know. Does that like land?
Yes, no, it's totally, because I thought when I kind of like thought of this tip, something that really helped me. And I was thinking, well, what about people who are just still living in the country where they were born? And the truth is that we all do have culture, and that's what I mean by it. And it's actually when you start looking into it, and in your case, I mean, the American cultural landscape is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
It's
all
true.
of the different people who went there and built lives. And I mean, there's always going to be the dark history of every single country. South Africa's got it, and that was partly the reason why I never did acknowledge my culture, because of what happened in South Africa with apartheid and so forth, which I mean was completely, it was just I grew up with that shadow on me. But I mean, the truth is that if you live under that shadow, and if you worry about the darker parts and not celebrate the good parts, and the fact that it's still a community, and it's still a community where you have a place and belong to, then you're actually just giving up a part of yourself and losing it. And that's sad.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those tips. I love them so much, and they're so good.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, it was such a great experience. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a few wrap-up questions before we close. So what is one way you slow down amidst our busy world?
Pole dance.
I love it.
Seriously. Busy day. I can't make this pole dance class, and you do it, and you're just like, oh, I love this so much. I feel so great. And it literally makes you slow down.
Yeah. Do you have to go to a class in order to do it? Like, do you have a pole at home?
Yes, no, it's a very good question. And I was lucky right before last year and lockdown and all of that. I actually bought a pole, so I have one at home. And I'm lucky enough not to have a lot of furniture, because you do need a bit of space. Otherwise, you'd just be banging into couches and chairs and tables.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And you're right. Like that would have been rough to go a whole year without your kind of like your mode of releasing and just being able to come back to yourself. So that's amazing that you were able to get that beforehand.
Yes, definitely.
And then who are a couple of humans that you deeply admire, or folks that you're currently learning from?
This is actually quite a difficult question, because I'm constantly learning from a whole lot of different people. But I would say at this point, and this has helped me since the start of the year a lot, is the podcast community. And it's amazing. Like, if you are a podcaster or a guest or anything like that, get in touch with people who do the same thing, because they've got so much knowledge and skills to share. And yes, would you like me to specify specific people as well?
I would love that if you have some. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on the podcast community, I'm going to do that. And then I think I only have that. It's so sad at the moment.
No, I mean, I feel like we all go through seasons where there's something different. And the podcast community is pretty epic. I did not realize it was a thing until relatively recently. So yes, please share away.
I promise I'm not a sad human being. No, this is, so I would say, keep in mind, it's been locked down for like 1 year in the UK. Anyway, so on the podcast community, I just have to say that like people who have really inspired me, two people who run something called We Are Podcast, and they're based jointly in Australia and Los Angeles, and that's James Whitaker, they're the founders, and Ronsley Vass. So they've just like opened up my eyes to thinking very carefully about what I want to do with my podcast and having the impact I want to have, because that's what they do in the work they do. So, and I just attended, like, this is a nice little story attached to that. So just to put it in context, I basically got one of those newsletters, the millions of newsletters in your email inbox. And I just saw this conference happening. It's called We Are Podcast. It's a bit of a strange name, but anyway. And I clicked on it, and it said like, because at that stage I was a little bit tight on budget and all of that. Yeah. So just email if you want a ticket, and if you've got any financial constraints. So I did that, and I honestly didn't think I was going to get a reply, but I did. So I got the opportunity to attend the conference, and then it just changed my whole life.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
That's amazing. I have not heard of that before, so I'll have to check that out.
Oh, yes,
so We Are Podcast.
We Are Podcast. Easy to remember. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's a small community at the moment, but it's amazing.
Sometimes the small communities are the best. So
yeah, because you get to know loads of different people in it, and they're very supportive. So and they get these incredible speakers as well. So
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, otherwise I'll be talking all about that for I've actually written a blog post, written a newsletter about it, and yeah.
I love it. That's so good. I can sense the energy of that too. And I feel like that's what you really seek when you're finding community. So that's really, really beautiful. So good. And then how can we find and support you online?
So best way to find all of my links is my website, which is creatorsabroad.com. But I'm very active on Instagram, and that's at creators.abroad. And those are the two main places. And yes, feel free to get in touch. Ask me about anything. If you think you're a good fit for the podcast, or if you just want to see what I do in the production agency, get a free consultation, all of that's online on my website. And there are some pretty epic photos on there as well, if you just want to have a look at those. By the way, that's the other person. So my designer, photographer person that just works with me. He does amazing work, and I just steal all of his photos and put it on. No, technically not stealing, but he knows.
I love it. So good. Yes. So everybody should definitely check out creators.abroad on Instagram, and then creatorsabroad.com, because it's also just such a joy to follow you on Instagram. And I just really appreciate the energy that you put out into the world. And so thank you so much for being here today, because your message is resonating. And I think it's just so beautiful to hear your story as well, in that background piece, to and honor how far you've had to go through so much to get where you're at right now. And that message and that passion that you've had to actually impact and to support other people is really coming to fruition, which is so beautiful. I love it. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you once again for inviting me onto the show, Megan. It's been an awesome experience.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Reclamation Podcast. I hope it served you on your own reclamation journey, and know that I am rooting for you all the way. If you are desiring support on your journey, head to megscolleen.com. That's megscolleen.com. to learn more about me and my current coaching offerings and availability. If you want to learn more about the show guests, head to the show website, thereclamationpodcast.com. And last, but definitely not least, if you found value in the show, sharing this episode with friends and posting a quick review is always appreciated. As always, reclamation is yours.